This is Sharon and Mitch. They contacted me to discuss the sale of Sharon's aunt's home in the Harrisburg area, which I will say, I think speaking for you, they were a little bit concerned about because they live in Maryland. Sharon and Mitch had generously agreed to walk us through the process from start to finish in order to give others a better understanding of the process. Sharon, your aunt had lived in the home for almost 20 years, and she was very independent, including maintaining that beautiful garden in the back. So this move was very emotional for her and something we needed time to process, for her to process. Would you agree?
Yes. On some days she wanted to sell the house, and on some days she didn't want to sell the house. So we really appreciated your flexibility in scheduling and rescheduling and revisiting us until we got her to the place where she realized she really couldn't live alone anymore.
Yeah. And that is so typical, as I told you. And I see that with all my clients in this situation. It's a very emotional move, and it really takes a lot of time for them to wrap their head around the idea of making that move. So I wanted to start by asking you basically to take us through, just briefly, from that first phone call until the time we actually met. You kind of alluded to it. We had a number of phone conversations before we even met because it does take time. There's a lot of questions. There's a lot of things that really you have to think through and talk about before we even meet. So I wanted you to talk a little bit, if you would, just about, from that first conversation through the couple conversations until we got to the point of meeting, what that looked like from your perspective.
Well, I think we had never sold a home for 40 years, so I didn't understand the sale process anymore. It's so different now. Everything is electronic, which is wonderful. But then the other issue was doing it long distance, and how would we clear out the house? How would we get rid of the furniture? When would we move? How do you advertise it? And we wanted to get her out of the house before the showings occurred.
Right.
And it was a quandary. We didn't know what to do. And that's where we depended on you to help us.
And I might add that she was moving into a one-bedroom apartment in an independent living facility. And that even made it more difficult trying to figure out, number one, how to get there, how to just coordinate the move from an hour and a half away. And we've got a lot of things going here, so we had to kind of budget the time. And you made it very, very easy for us to do that, being available when you were and understanding exactly what was going on.
I appreciate that. I really do, because it really is a process. It's like you said, and that's kind of what I wanted to talk through. I know you used a number of the vendors that I recommended, as well as some you found that were great new connections for me. But tell me a little bit about that. Like, I know we had to arrange for a cleaner. You utilized the estate sale services company. We had a junk removal person come. Can you tell me a little bit about that process and how that was helpful to you, especially being so far away?
Yes, I think the first thing that we talked about that was invaluable was the estate sale gentleman that you introduced us to, because then we met with him and he explained how the process would work. And what we did is we took Aunt Joanne through the house, and I put a pink sticker on everything she was taking to her one-bedroom apartment, and everything that didn't have a pink sticker. Then the estate sale guy came in and looked through the house and determined if and when we could hold the estate sale, because it has to be profitable for him as well as us.
Sure.
So we came to a split, how much we would get from each sale, and we made the plan to do that. And that was just amazing to me, because I just couldn't figure out how to whittle it down to just what she needed, but he was very, very helpful.
Well, that's wonderful to hear.
And then once we got figured out what we wanted to move, the next thing was finding a mover. And so you did provide us with the mover, but the independent living facility also recommended a mover who was familiar with the facility. And we decided that would be our best bet, because he would know the rules of the facility. So he came in and removed everything that had a pink tag on it. So then we're just left with the estate sale stuff. And the gentleman quickly arranged the estate sale. It was Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Mhm.
And then everything he was unable to sell, he put into the garage because there was an offsite garage.
Right.
The next problem was the house was a mess. It was dirty. There was a stair lift, an electric stair lift up the stairs. So we had to get rid of that. We had to clean the house. We had to declutter like the curtains, the fixtures, so it looked fresh and new, and open the blinds and just make it beautiful. And the person that you recommended was amazing. She took
Yeah.
the stair treads off. She cleaned the house. She moved some additional stuff into the garage. So then it was ready to show. The
Right.
next step was to stage it,
Mhm.
because an empty house doesn't sell as well if you don't put some touches into it. And Meg, who you recommended, was fabulous. She brought in, set up the kitchen with a coffee maker and a cookbook, cushions
Right.
on, put a cushion there, had a little table and chairs on the front porch. I mean, she
Mhm.
just did a lovely job. Didn't take her long, just an afternoon,
Right.
to make it look very livable. And it was perfect.
And
Now with the go ahead.
what I was going to say is, and what we appreciate, again, being far away, is that you basically arranged all this stuff. If we had had to try to find these people, contract with them, do all that, I don't think it ever would have gotten done, because we just didn't know who, where, when, how, or any of that. So because you were able to coordinate everything and make some of those phone calls for us, made it very easy.
I appreciate that, because it really is important to have those resources in place.
Yes.
And it's really important to me. I know you guys know that the vendors operate in the same way I would, have that same integrity, the same care and compassion for the client. And I really feel like all of them delivered. The estate sale company, now they were able to sell that chairlift, right?
Yes.
So that was great, because now someone else is able to use it.
Exactly.
And then Vicky was able to clean the stairs and get, any remnants from that out of there. And I give you guys credit. I loved that as soon as I talked about Meg and the staging, you understood why I was recommending it. Now, your aunt had a relatively small home, really charming Cape Cod, in the area of, general area of Harrisburg. And, but, some people think, well, it's a small home, it doesn't need staged, or it's going to be vacant, I don't want to put all this furniture in. But I really give you guys credit that you understood from the beginning the value of doing that. And she was able to take it from a vacant home to have it feel just a little more charming and homey. And you really ended up getting a lot of showings and a lot of attention.
Yes, I was impressed with all the showings we got.
Yeah, you really did. We held an open house, and there was a lot of traffic at your open house. The feedback was all really positive. So while you had all this prep on the front end, it definitely paid off, because I know from the beginning you were very clear. Your motivation for Joanne was to maximize the money that she was able to take with her and have for her new life. So doing all those things, it really paid off when it came time for the showings and for the open house. And then you ended up, or Joanne ended up getting multiple offers. I believe, if I recall, you had 4 offers, right?
Yes, we did.
So yeah, so walk us through, how was that challenging for you to understand the 4 offers, to make a decision, to, compare? You're comparing 4 different contracts. So tell me a little bit about that process.
Well, fortunately, you put it all in a very simple spreadsheet, one page. And you very clearly went through each of the pros and cons for each of the buyers. Whether there was a contingency on their financing, what their mortgage rate was. Did they require an appraisal? Did they require an inspection? And was it FHA or VA? And then one offer, wonderfully, was cash.
Right.
And you explained to us and to Aunt Joanne, who is, elderly and sometimes a little confused, clearly explained to us the pros and cons of all the offers. And you made a recommendation, and we followed it. We took the cash offer because we were concerned that a house that was built in the 30s, there might be some inspection issues. we were concerned that, yeah, we got some great offers, but maybe the appraisal wouldn't come in high enough, and that would be an issue. So everything worked out perfectly. We took the cash offer, and we closed within what, 2 weeks?
It was pretty fast. Yes. It was maybe 2 to
Amazing.
3 weeks. It was pretty fast. Yes. Yeah. And I just want to make sure that I'm clear, because I feel like this is something that I say to people all the time. And I want to make sure that it translated to you during during the whole process. Well, I always say to people, while I'm giving you information, you will always be the decision maker. Can you tell me, were you feeling that through the transaction, that while I might have had a recommendation, here's why you might want to consider the cash offer? Did you feel that you were always in the driver's seat?
Oh, absolutely. And the three of us, Mitch and Aunt Joanne and I, we talked about it and we talked about it, and we each came to our own independent decision. And it was coincidentally your decision, also your recommendation.
Okay. Well, a good decision kind of made sense to everybody, I guess, And we were kind of hoping for you all along that you might have a cash offer, because that is definitely an ideal, as long as the rest of the terms are acceptable. So then we went to closing. I mean, tell me about that process. It was cash, so it was pretty pain-free, right? Just from the contract to the closing period.
Yes, the contract was simple. It was online. You just clicked and initialed and clicked and initialed. So we could sit in Maryland and click and initial, and the contract was signed. Closing, we didn't actually have to go to Harrisburg. We did happen to be there, so we met with the settlement agent, and signed off on the papers the day before closing. And so the actual day of closing, we didn't even have to show up. It was just perfect.
Great. So then the day of closing, I went just as a very limited power of attorney on your behalf, just to sign that one final closing document, which you saw ahead of time. And then I know I stopped afterward to take Joanne some candy and flowers, and she seemed very settled in her new home, which ultimately was the goal of this entire process.
Right.
Yeah. So overall, tell me, any advice, any final thoughts you have for anybody who might be listening and thinking, oh gosh, how am I going to get through this process with my family member?
Well,
Good luck.
yeah, good luck. I mean, it was the difficulty was certainly not with your process. The difficulty was with our aunt, who sometimes didn't understand, and we had to kind of walk her through again and again and again and again. But because we had the power of attorney, and because you were there to guide us through and make it painless and make it work quickly from an hour and a half away, so we didn't have to keep on going up there, it made the process pretty seamless, which could have been very, very difficult. And what you told us at the beginning was how quickly it would sell, and it did, and everything you said worked out. And I must commend you on how patient you were working with our aunt, because sometimes she just doesn't remember, and sometimes she just doesn't quite understand. And after you talked to her, she seemed to understand. So that made it very easy. We would recommend you very highly. If we were selling our house, which we're not going to, by the way.
Never. I'm never selling another house.
We love it here.
Mitch, I appreciate that. I have to tell you, it literally, I genuinely got goosebumps and teared up just a little bit, because you know what I always think, I think some of it stems back to just my mom. I dealt with a lot of these things that my, ideal client base has dealt with. I've sold the home where I raised my child. My mom passed away. I've dealt with a lot of these things, and they're very emotional. And I just try and really always keep in mind that this is someone's family, this is someone's aunt, this is someone's mom, and the bottom line is we're all going to be there someday, right? We're all going to be there in one situation or another. And we need people in this world who are going to help us get through those challenging times in life in a very compassionate way. So that's something that actually means a lot to me, that you said the business recommendation. I appreciate that 100%, but trying to do it with compassion as far as for this specific clientele, that's really the goal. So that means a lot to me that you mentioned that. Thank you. So, So any parting words, anything I didn't ask you about that you think, someone in a similar position of yours, it might be helpful, anything that I didn't cover?
Well, I would say that all the vendors that we used, the mover, the stager, the cleaner,
and the estate.
and the estate, they were all outstanding. That made it easy. And and to coordinate all that and have all that at your disposal just made it easy. So that was very, very helpful.
Wonderful. Good. Well, I'm glad to hear it. I think, I would say, what is, I guess the last thing as I'm thinking it through, what was the timeline from when you first called me until we sold? I honestly am trying to think it through, how long that was. Do you guys recall?
Well, if you recall, we were gone the month of January in Florida.
That's right. That's right.
So
I do
we
remember
talked in December, but then we had to put everything on hold for the whole month of January.
Right. Good reason, though. You were in sunny Florida. Okay. And I think actually I met with Joanne while you guys were in Florida just to kind of put a name to a face for her and just kind of let her see me. That's when I toured the home initially. And then your closing was just last month, right?
Yep,
Yeah.
April 10th.
And I
Or
think
still this month, I guess.
And she moved out of the house March the 7th.
Yes. And that, I'm so glad that worked out. We had talked about that in the beginning, and I'm so glad it worked out because really anyone, and then, with Joanne, just as you mentioned, maybe having some memory issues, that's stressful. I have very young clients who get stressed about the showings. It's strangers in and out of your home all day long. And when you prep it well, which you guys did, we're talking about a lot of showings. So for her to have to be out of the house for hours on end, just didn't seem reasonable. So it was just, so amazing that it all worked out that she was able to move before we started that process.
Yeah, that was key. That is absolutely key. And then, of course, there was Kit Kat, her cat.
Right. Kit Kat, yep. And Kit Kat seemed very settled in her new place, I have to say.
But she wasn't going anywhere without that cat.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I think we signed the contract the second week in February, and we with you, and actually settled April 10th. So you're talking from start to finish, really 2 months, which is pretty quick.
It is considering all the different components we had in play.
Yeah.
Absolutely agree. Yeah. Yep. Okay, well, thank you both so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it. The goal for this is just to try and, get the message out to people that, it doesn't have to be so overwhelming.